Well, hello, and welcome to the MilVet podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Bo Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the MilVet podcast. I am your host, Bo Higgins, and I have the honor and privilege to be joined today by a good friend of mine, Dick Leinenkugel, and excited to talk about Dick's journey in the Marine Corps and on to bigger and better things and what he's doing now. Before we get into that, just for those that may be new to the MilVet podcast, for those that don't know, the MilVet is a company that provides an executive pathway for veterans, primarily get into the private equity and venture capital space. But we also provide a lot of advice for transitioning veterans, do these podcasts, a lot of support and newsletters. If you haven't signed up for the MilVet newsletter, please check out milvet.org to learn more about what we do and how we may be able to help you out. But today, again, we're here for the podcast and excited to have my friend Dick join us today. And Dick, would love to have you do a quick intro and tell us what you're doing these days.
Hi, good morning, Bo. Well, I've lowered my handicap index from 15.3 to 13.8 this summer up here in Eagle River, Wisconsin. So definitely working on the golf game. I do attribute some of that, though, to a former Marine, Bob Parsons, Parsons Extreme Golf out in, bought some of those clubs. And by the way, he gives a good military discount. So those PXG clubs, I've got to put some of it on him. I am enjoying retirement. I retired as the president and CEO of the Jacob Leinenkugel Brewing Company in 2022. And my wife, Jean, and I live here in Eagle River, Wisconsin. I'm about 75 feet from a beautiful lake right now. And we're enjoying our summers up here in Eagle River, Wisconsin.
That is awesome, and I did have the privilege, obviously, to join you and Jean with my wife Liz this summer for a beer for Leinenkugel. I must say, one of my favorites, the Summer Shandy. Never go wrong with that. And would love to share your story. It's a super cool that you're retired now, and great to be able to stay in touch with you. But would love to hear about your journey to get from how it all started. Obviously, the military, a super important part of your family and your tradition. And would love to. What was the impetus for you to join the military? Did you know when you went to Marquette you were going to do that? Kind of how that all began, and maybe talk a little bit about the formative years of Marquette and laying the foundation for what came in the future.
Yeah, I've got to go back way before Marquette, though, Bo, and I think it's not too dissimilar to people of my generation who grew up with their fathers in serving in World War II. And my dad, Bill Leinenkugel, was a World War II Marine. He served in Saipan, and he was one of the original founders of the Chippewa Valley Marine Club. And through that club, I got to see several World War II Marines. I remember one of his friends, G.G. Sweet, and I didn't know a whole lot about G.G. Sweet until I read about him in a Marine Corps history book. Granville G. Sweet was awarded the Silver Star when he was in 0311 serving on the USS Nevada at Pearl Harbor when it was attacked. And he later became a Marine tank officer in Korea. And Granville G. Sweet was awarded a Silver Star for gallantry in Korea. His tank company held down the enemy forces, and he saved a lot of lives. So I got to meet George Glanville, or Granville G. George, we called him Gigi Sweet, a friend of my dad. So I grew up around Marines and former Marines. Every November 10th, my mom and dad would go to the Marine Corps birthday ball. that my dad was instrumental in organizing in the Chippewa Valley. So we grew up with that. I think first it really reflected on my brother Jake. He's 5.5 years older than me, and he actually enrolled in the PLC program when attending the University of Wisconsin. And I remember him going out to Quantico. I think back then it was like 2 6-week summers that he had to go out. And lo and behold, Jake was on the 5.5 year program at Madison. He's selling a lot of beer, though. But he didn't graduate he didn't get his degree.
Huh.
And the Marine Corps said, "Oh, you're going in enlisted."
Oh, God.
And they did not send him to boot camp because he had gone through 2 6-week programs of PLC, but they sent him right out to Pendleton. And he went to work for then Major Peter Pace, who was the first MarDiv staff secretary. And I think Jake could type and read and write. And he was meritoriously promoted to sergeant in a year. And it was then Major Pace that sent him back to Pepperdine to complete his college degree. So I went to Marquette as Naval ROTC, and I'll tell you that story of how I got that scholarship or even heard about it. But I was actually at Quantico in the summer of '79 doing my Bulldog course when Jake had to come back and go through OCS.
That's hilarious.
So we were out there at the same time, but he got commissioned before me. It was my brother Jake, when he was going through that PLC program, that introduced me to his OSO, his officer selection officer in Milwaukee, a guy by the name of Captain Danny Cross. And Captain Cross told me about this Naval ROTC program. I didn't know anything about it. I knew about the academies, but I didn't really want that amount of discipline, in college. So I applied for both the Army and the Naval ROTC scholarships. I was awarded both. And growing up with Marines and my brother Jake as a Marine, I chose the Marine Corps option and went to Marquette University after graduating from Chippewa Falls Senior High School. So 1976, went to Milwaukee. And, we grew up in a household in Wisconsin. And again, I think it's a lot of it was having this generation that served their country in World War II. And it was really a sense of service. It was modeled to us by our dad. And frankly, I wanted to be part of the best. So that's why I chose the Marine Corps.
No, I love that. And I love the connection of, growing up in a Marine Corps family, and you didn't necessarily have Tun Tavern, but you had Leinenkugel's Brewery there. So you had some beers always involved somehow in a Marine Corps story. So I love how it all kind of coalesces and comes together. And really funny about your brother Jake. And I had no idea that even was a thing, that you could, not go into PLC because you didn't. They just send you right to the infantry battalion and work for General Pace. That's really, what a small world. That's really crazy, but good stuff.
Yeah, and General Pace, I remember him as a major coming to Quantico and giving Jake the oath of office too. So it was really having a cool connection with then Major Pace.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's all, and it's super cool to be able to follow, obviously, in your dad's footsteps in the Marine Corps tradition. My dad was a Marine as well, although he was in that weird time between kind of Korea and Vietnam, so not active duty, and I didn't know him as a Marine, but he talked stories about it, so I know how much that kind of gets in your blood as a kid, and certainly inspires a lot of us to do that same thing. Well, I would love to dig into more about your time at Marquette. This is the formative years for you. My wife being a Marquette grad, I certainly near MU rah-rah, a little near and dear to my heart as well. But I'd like to just kind of focus on or hear about, how did that time in Naval ROTC, or maybe even just your early years in the Marine Corps, set you up for success later on in life, and kind of just talk a little bit about that and just the things that, it's probably self-evident to most folks, but, anything that stands out about that time or those memories or that experience that you feel like was a defining moment of, okay, this is what it's all about. This is what I'm going to kind of build my my future path on based on that time and experience.
Yeah, it was an interesting time, Bo, because we were, coming out of post-Vietnam,
Yeah.
and we didn't know a whole lot about active duty Marines other than our AMOI and MOI, who both served in Vietnam. I later ran into Gunnery Sergeant Batenga when I was in the active duty Marines. He showed up on a beach in Korea, and he was our AMOI. So it was such a small Marine Corps. These guys were decorated Vietnam veterans, and the Marine Corps was really, cleaning up their ranks and downsizing during that time frame. It was interesting time at Marquette because we had a great class of Naval ROTC. We had a large class, and about 8 of us later went in the Marine Corps and chose, were Marine Corps options. So it was a large Naval ROTC class with Marines. Interesting in, walking around campus and, having the short hair and walking in your uniform every Thursday. It wasn't the University of Wisconsin, which had some significant war protests. It was Marquette, Jesuit institution. I don't know if we were respected or just seen as weird at the time, but we had a pretty good culture, and we got together for happy hours. The legal drinking age at that time was 18. So after drill every Thursday, we went to Haggerty's Glockamore and had beers and played pool and, got to talk with the AMOI and the rest of the staff, kind of in a happy hour setting, right? A captain's call setting. And I think that was, really cool and informative. And then, of course, we all went to the basic school together after commissioning. I think, in those early years, though, the highlight was the election of President Reagan, in 1980. So we were commissioned in May of 1980. We immediately went to TBS Echo Company in May. And later that year, I think when Reagan was elected and announced, the building of the 600-ship Navy and restoring the pride in the uniform and doubling our salary within a year, from $11,000 to $20,000 a year or whatever it was, you really felt great about being in the military and being Marine during that time.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, it's certainly a very transitional time for our country, and from that time of Vietnam into the Reagan era, and really, again, the growth of the military and just changing the narrative. I think, obviously, there's a lot of had to be cleaned up. Certainly, a lot of negativity, I think, about the military, and we all have read about it or seen it or lived it in many cases, obviously. But a great era to be in. Certainly, those early '80s, as things were, kind of moving forward in a good light. But what was your, what are any highlights of your time serving in the Marine Corps? It's always the guys. Was there anything in particular that, stands out as this was the pinnacle of my time in the Corps, or the best experience you had out there?
Bo, let me talk about our basic school class first, because you'll know a few of these folks, I'm sure. So Echo Company was primarily Naval ROTC commissioning route. And within our company, we had 3 sons of general officers. So how would you like to be that CO of the basic school at that time? So my platoon mate was Jim Lukeman, who you served with.
Yes, sir.
General Jim Lukeman. He was a Notre Dame grad. Andrew O'Donnell, his dad was CG FMF PAC. And then we had Rob Barrow, whose dad was Commandant at the time.
Yeah.
So, Jim's dad was a 1-star, Anthony Lukeman. Drew O'Donnell, a 3-star lieutenant general. I think he headed up FMF PAC, and then Rob Barrow, his dad, Commandant of the Marine Corps. So it was pretty cool. We had a lot of classmates whose dads were senior officers, either in the Navy or Marines. So I can't imagine the eyeballs that were on that CO. I was fortunate enough to get my first choice of duty station, Hawaii. Coming out of the basic school, I applied, or I listed ground supply, artillery, and I think logistics as my third choice, and I got ground supply. So I went off to Camp Lejeune. I'll call it Lejeune. I don't know how you pronounce it, but
I'm
I'm
a
going to go with
Lejeune
the
guy, but
family's
that's okay. All good.
pronunciation. Went to ground supply school, and then getting stationed. I think at that time Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station in Hawaii was probably one of the highlights. The First Marine Brigade was there, so the Third Marine Regiment. I went to the BSSG, the Brigade Service Support Group, and within 3 months was assigned to MSSG 37. So we were deploying with the 31st Marine Amphibious Unit. I think they're called expeditionary units now. And I deployed later on that year in support of 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines as the MSSG supply officer. The MEU, or the MAO at that time, was commanded by Colonel Joe Hoare, who I think became later a 4-star general.
Yeah.
And one of the highlights was first meeting Colonel Hoare in a bar in Olongapo.
That's a winner.
And he had 3 or 4 bottles of San Miguel lined up in front of him. And my friend who I was turning over with, Mike Chenichek, took me over here. Let me introduce you to Colonel Hoare. So, yeah, that was interesting. But the deployments were fabulous. Here you are, a 22, 23-year-old Marine, given that amount of accountability and responsibility at such a young age, and you're out seeing the world. The Philippines, Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia. Did a deployment to Oman and Somalia. Of course, a little bit in Okinawa, Korea. But I mean, just everything that you were experiencing at such a young age, and as well as being responsible for 30 plus Marines in a supply platoon, was just an incredible experience as a young Marine officer.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I talk about that often with folks that, at age 23, 24, to have millions of dollars of equipment, dozens of people that you're responsible for. I mean, that doesn't happen in the corporate world. At age 23, 24, no way are you going to be responsible for that much. I mean, it's just not, it doesn't happen that way. But just that's just expected behavior for a lieutenant in the Marine Corps to be able to do that and to get that experience and you don't even appreciate them. You're doing it. It's like, this is what we do. I mean, you don't even think anything of it. Like, everybody else is doing it too. It's just like, it's what we do. It's part of our ethos to be able to have that responsibility at that super young age and then to be very successful with it. But I think it certainly sets you up for success later on in whatever you do in a variety of ways, but certainly also makes it like you can do anything. If you've been through the Marine Corps training, you've led overseas and abroad, you have these all of a sudden these Marines that are coming in that are a representation of the entire United States population, the greatest melting pot of all time from a leadership perspective. It's an amazing experience. Again, I think there's nothing that compares to the level of responsibility you have in the military before the age of 25, which certainly only helps to set you up for success as you do wrap up your military career and go on to whatever may be next. Whether you stay in for 30 years or 5 years, doesn't matter. It's still an amazing part of that journey as a lieutenant, as an officer, for sure.
Yeah, without question, Bo. And not only the responsibility, but the accountability. And, I remember signing for all of the munitions that we took on board the ship. And that was the major thing, is I was told that there's one thing that can get you fired, or a couple of things that can get you fired. One is the accountability of the munitions that you're signing for, making sure that all of that is accounted for and returned and properly accounted for. The second was the controlled drug block that we took out. So we had, the controlled drugs for a Marine Corps Infantry Battalion for 30 days. So, all the morphine and everything else. But luckily, everything was good there. But I did have an incident where I remember our clothing block, forget what we called it, but we would take a block of camouflage utilities and other things, and we would fly around to ships and we would keep the clothing block, but cash sales, that's what it was called. We sold it. It was cash, right? And I remember coming back from that block and we were $600 short.
Oh.
And I never really touched it. It was signed to one of our staff NCOs. It was really his accountability, his block. He had the clerks and everything. And when we got back to Kaneohe, we were $600 short. And I know I had my CO, the BSSG colonel. He and I, let's say we had less than an amicable relationship. He didn't like me very much. And I don't know if I respected him all that much either. But anyway, I know he wanted to bring me up on charges and instigate an investigation into that clothing block because I was short. And what I did was I wrote a check for the missing $600. We weren't short. The clothing block was whole. I accepted the responsibility and was accountable for that as a Marine. So it taught me a lesson. It cost me a lesson too, right?
Yeah.
But it taught me a lesson that, hey, I was accountable for it. I didn't want to go through an investigation for that.
Yeah, right. Easy to write the check. It's a big check back in that day for time.
Oh, it was a huge check. Yeah, that was a month. Yeah, I didn't go to the O Club for a while.
Right. You're living on MREs for a while after that one,
Right.
But yeah. But it's a great lesson learned. Again, the need and the requirement and the willingness to step up, accept the responsibility. I mean, again, that's what you do. I mean, you are, as lieutenant, you're put in that position. You have to be able to be willing to do that and make that happen. So a great lesson learned at a cost, but doing the right thing is always the right thing. So, great to do that and see the impact that it had, obviously, and again, setting you up for success for the future. But I mean, your career in the Marine Corps is relatively short. But what was your rationale for getting out of the Corps? I mean, did you know going in you only wanted to do a certain period of time? I mean, you obviously had the family business, although you didn't go right into it. I'd love to kind of what was the kind of dynamic of your time in the Corps, getting out, and where and kind of how that led kind of to the future of your career.
Yeah, Bo, they wanted me to go out on a third deployment because I was a single officer. Here I was stationed in Hawaii. Great place to be stationed, right? I mean, I love golf. I love the water. I love the beach. And no, Lieutenant Leinenkugel, we'd like you to go out and support 3-3. And I said, I'm not going to make the Marine Corps a career. Can you give me another billet? And I actually applied to become a general's aide, but the aforementioned colonel, who was the head of the BSSG, denied my application. And I was assigned to maintenance float. And maintenance float was the secondary repairables, ran a warehouse. And I was just fine with that. And because I knew I was getting out, and I reflect back on that decision now, Bo, and I reflect back and I didn't consider the alternative, which was staying in.
Yeah.
And I should have.
Yeah.
But that wasn't, I came into the Marine Corps, even though I was a regular officer, regular commission out of Naval ROTC, I came in thinking, no, I want to pursue a business career. It's what I went to Marquette for. That's where my passion lies. Um, and submitted my letter to resign. Then they extend you in Hawaii. They don't move you back to the mainland. Typically, Hawaii is a 3 year. But I was there, 3.5 years roughly. And I reflect back, I should have at least considered that because you get your orders. Even though you had resigned your commission, I got my orders for my next duty station, Coronado.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
3 year assignment,
Wow, that
Coronado. I'm
wouldn't be
going,
all bad. Yeah, that's pretty good.
man, that's not so bad.
Definitely, definitely.
But I always wanted to pursue a career in business. At the time, our company, our family's company, the Jacob Leinenkugel Brewing Company, my dad was running it. My brother Jake had left the Marine Corps, and Jake was really, a tremendous leader. He was 03, 01, and ran worked for then Lieutenant Colonel Len Hayes, 3.5. Uh, and Colonel Hayes, I remember him mentoring Jake and saying, Jake, you've got a bright future in the Marine Corps, but your family, is calling you back. And your family and your family's business, your dad, and that was kind of the succession, at least in my dad's mind at that point. So Jake left the Marine Corps, but when he went back, the company was fairly small, and they couldn't take another family member
Yeah.
in the business at the time. So in 1984, when I was getting out, I actually at that time there was a company called Career Seminars. I think they were based in San Francisco, and they primarily worked with military junior officers who were getting out after their 4 or 5 year commitment, and they were headhunters, and they were placing them with major companies, major Fortune 500 companies, and they would secure the interviews and coach you and get your resume in order and set up the interviews. And I interviewed with Texas Instruments and Procter and Gamble, Exxon, Mobile Chemical, Wine World, which was Behringer winery at the time, and others. And I received several offers from companies, and I was pursuing a sales role with Procter and Gamble when my mom and dad came to visit me in Hawaii in 1983. And I took my dad to Maui, and we played golf at Ka'anapali, and we were at twosome, and we joined up with a twosome, a guy by the name of Steve Lesnick and his son Josh. And it turns out that Steve had started an upstart sports marketing company along with Jim Kemper Jr., Kemper Insurance, and it was called Kemper Sports Management. And we sat and had beers after golf with Steve and Josh, his son. And Steve told me that the person who was running the Women's Kemper Open was being promoted to another role. And he asked if I would interview for the job of executive director or tournament director of the Women's Kemper Open, which was held on Maui. And I said, sure, I'll interview. And I interviewed with Doug Schmidt, tournament director, and later on that February of 1984, and they offered me the role. I was this close to taking that sales role with Procter and Gamble, but I ended up taking the role with Kemper Sports Management, headed back to Illinois. They were based in Northbrook. And later on that November, I was back out on Maui setting up for the golf tournament. And I did that for 3 years. So that was kind of a, weird way. Wasn't on my radar screen at all, but ended up getting into the sports marketing business.
It's so good. I talk about this all the time. I mean, the reality of any job you get post-military, the vast majority is about networking. And again, you weren't trying to network per se. You're just having a conversation with folks playing golf, but that's networking. That's what networking is, just sharing ideas and talking about what you're doing. And you never know where that's going to lead. It doesn't always lead to a job that day. But again, just the ability and taking the time to talk to some folks and share what you're doing. I mean, that is the reality of how business works. I mean, so many people don't have a plan. They're in the job market. They're talking to a lot of people, but you never know when the right opportunity comes along and the right timing. And just it's fantastic that happened like that. And for someone that loves golf anyway, that's a great place to be, obviously, and loves Hawaii. It's a pretty
Right.
good combination. It's a pretty good sweet spot of threading a needle for things that are not too bad. It sounds like, I would say. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it was about 3 years later after doing the tournament. We moved the tournament from Maui to Kauai uh, in '85 and or '86, and then in 1987. And my wife and I had just had our first son, our first child, in 1987, and it was at that time that I put together a business plan for the Chicago market. We didn't have a sales rep in Chicago, and I had seen what my brother had done in terms of building our brand in Minneapolis, where we were really taking off. And I put together a business plan, presented it to my brother. He took it to the board, a board of directors at Leinenkugels, and it was all family members. In fact, the chairman was a grandson of our founder, Jacob Leinenkugel. My dad and his brother were on the board, of course, and as well as another family, one of Jacob's daughters, the Meyer family. I had representatives on the board, and it went to a board vote to bring me on board in Chicago as a sales rep. And I understand it wasn't unanimous, but I was hired, and I began my career in beer in May of 1987. I remember getting a letter from my dad. Back then, that's how you communicated. A letter from my dad, and my dad was a prolific letter writer. And if I had a lesson to share, and I'll share that now, is do the personal notes. It's easy to send a text or an email, but a personal note goes a long way. It's something that people will read and remember. But my dad wrote me a letter, and he always typed it. He said, "I understand that you've been in the beer business for a week, and there still is no shortage of beer."
Fair enough.
So joined our family's company, Bo, and it was interesting because I joined in May, started working the market, immediately made an impact, had the plan, wrote the plan. I probably wouldn't have done that without Marine Corps training. And later that year, Miller Brewing Company approached our company. Miller was number one brewer in Wisconsin, and had come out with Miller Lite in the mid '70s, which really changed their trajectory. And but Miller was looking at this specialty beer business back then, or micro brewing it was called. It wasn't called craft beer. And they had tried to get into that business with a couple of different products, and that didn't work. So they said, well, let's partner with a smaller brewery and see if we can give them the backroom resources, allow them to run it, and see if we can make the business bigger. So our family sold to Miller Brewing Company in 1988. And we kept the sales forces separate for about 3 years, and then we integrated the sales forces. And I actually went to work as a chain account manager in Chicago for Miller Brewing Company, sold the whole portfolio of brands, including Leinenkugels. It was in 1984 that we had, or in 1994, that we came out with a beer called Leinenkugels Red Lager. And at the time, the first wave of specialty brewing was at its peak. Mm-hmm. And my brother Jake asked me to come back to our business, the Leinenkugel business, and lead its expansion of Leinenkugels Red Lager in terms of sales, which I created, brought back, hired a sales force, and we went out and sold Leinenkugels Red Lager into 40 states. So that was kind of my first big launch of a beer and heading up a sales team and within a much larger brewery. But that began to set up my career in beer, and I was off to the races then.
I love the idea of having a career in beer. I mean, as a guy from New Orleans, I can really appreciate that. It sounds like something I think I might have had one on the side, although it didn't wasn't getting paid for it. But that's awesome. One thing I'd love to touch on about your career, and especially what you talked about, is the importance or the ability to be able to do sales. And I think there's often a negative connotation in sales. Or I talk to a lot of transitioning veterans, like, oh, I don't want to do sales. I'm like, well, what do you think you're doing all the time? You're always selling yourself. You're
Yeah.
selling your capability. You're selling your unit. You're selling. I mean, life is sales in a lot of ways. Although it somehow I think has gotten or has maybe some negative. Maybe there's like the seedy used car salesman thing. Maybe people think about, or the bad car loan off the base. There is some of that. I get to it, but I mean, what would you talk about or highlight about the goodness of a career in sales and what it can do for you or the impact it can have? Again, I'm a believer that if you can do that, you can do anything in a lot of ways. But I would love to kind of your take on a sales job or sales roles in general.
Yeah. Well, it's always been my belief that nothing happens in an organization until a sale is made. Yeah, especially business. And I think that interaction, that one-on-one or one-on-10 or one-on-100. So I talk about chain sales, and some of my biggest sales that I made were to one person that impacted over 100 stores. So when you get a product featured or a beer featured or a beer on display in 100 stores, man, the impact of that is unbelievable. And not only what that does for the company and your organization, but what it does for you as the salesperson that put that together. It really boosts you, and you can see immediately the impact that you're having on that organization. So not only is it a tremendous confidence booster for you, but it helps your organization so greatly. So I'm a big proponent of sales. It did always have kind of a negative rap within Miller Brewing Company, even between sales and marketing.
Hmm.
You know, but I always believe that those marketers wouldn't have jobs without people out there actually pounding the pavement,
Yeah.
securing relationships, and making that one-on-one or one-on 100 sale.
No doubt about it. I mean, I think that's an interesting point. Marketing sounds like it's fun. Oh, let's have a party and give away free stuff, But like, that's great. But if there's no sale, then there's no money for the marketing if you're not selling anything, right? I mean, you got to
That's
have
right.
one before you can have the other. So, and I would be curious. I don't know if you have any insights too about as Leinenkugel, the family business got became part of Miller Brewing. A lot of the folks that listen to our podcast are in the venture capital and private equity markets, and are hoping to be acquired or have been acquired or acquiring other companies. I mean, any insights on what that was like from the being acquired perspective? I know you weren't in charge back then, but it obviously is something that's a family business. I mean, I assume obviously you lose some level of control, but you gain more resources. I think that's probably what that the goal of that is in some way, shape, or form. Any insights from that process, or maybe as things went forward, the process of being acquired?
Well, I think, Bo, that it ensured the brand would continue. Uh, an interesting thing as I reflect back on it now is that, like many family owned businesses, and this is where private equity comes into play in a lot of instances, is taking over or buying family owned businesses. In a lot of sense, we didn't have a continuity plan or a succession plan for the business. The third and fourth generation family members, my brother Jake and I were fifth, had not agreed upon a succession plan for the business. And this was the way for our shareholders at the time, who were, primarily in their 60s. Bill Casper, who was chairman of the board, and a third generation family member who was in his 80s. But this was a way for them to realize capital or cash for their work and investment into this business for over 100 years, and to take those dollars and redeploy them into foundations or other things, their other businesses. So I think as a family-owned business, one of the things that I counsel family-owned businesses, and especially generational businesses, is to work on your succession plan. And if you're going to keep it in the family, make sure that you're doing the proper due diligence to bring those family members in with the right amount of experience, and importantly, outside experience. And this is where I think the military comes into play. A lot of people don't consider military as outside experience, but it is,
Yeah.
and a really good experience, I think, for people to have. But I would say, people that are getting into private equity now, or looking at opportunities in private equity, this is a good place. Family business needs help. They need leadership. They need that outside perspective. And in many cases, this is a perfect opportunity for portfolio companies and private equity to either take a partnership or a ownership position in family-owned business.
No, we couldn't agree more on the MilVet side of the house. And that's what we're seeing too. There is a lot of consolidation in what I will call the services industry as a whole: HVAC, refrigeration, electrical, plumbing. I mean, a lot of those are family owned businesses, big business. I mean, these are, 6-figure, 7-figure, I mean, they're 8-figure businesses that have done very well. But to your point, family owned, regional, the son or the daughter doesn't want to take over that business. Farming, I mean, there's some things, maybe industries that aren't as sexy maybe for the next generation. And I think what we've seen is, as those private equity companies come in and maybe consolidate some of these industries, they need someone that can be the boots on the ground leader at that plant, in whatever town it is. And veterans do a great job of that. Veterans have the ability to, to lead, that comes over to given, but to communicate upward with the board, to communicate down with the employees. I mean, there's something that you can have, as we talked about earlier, the experience you have as a 25, 26, 27-year-old to be in charge of big budgets and big teams can apply to being able to come in and run that family-owned business. Now, understood, you have to have the ability to read a P&L, and there's some just basics of business you need to have on top of your military experience. But those are the kind of candidates that we at the MilVet are able to find. Guys that did 5 years, went back there, got their MBA, are now looking for the next opportunity, and to be able to run a portfolio company within private equity, many times that was family owned and acquired, is a sweet spot for veterans. And we're seeing that more and more because they do bring a unique combination of skills to be successful in that acquisition market, so to speak. And it's pretty great to see. Pretty great to see.
You know what you were just doing there, Bo, was selling.
That's what I do, right? I guess I'm the podcast. I'm talking about our business. We do good things. It's good stuff. So yeah, hopefully I'm selling to somebody out there. All good, all good. We tell us this storytelling, right? You can call it whatever you want. I can tell
Right.
stories, but well, we'd love to hear. I mean, obviously, you had the launch of the Leinenkugel Red, which was great, and then then from there, the Summer Shandy piece came soon after that, right? I mean, that was. I feel like that.
Yeah, Summer Shandy wasn't until 2006,
Was
and
that long? Okay, I couldn't remember
yeah,
that. That to me was the brand that is even today the one that everybody seems to know and has become, I assume, the biggest selling product in the Leinenkugel line. But talk about your growth inside the company. I mean, you were in the Miller, you know,
yeah.
working for them, but did they allow you to stay solely focused on the Leinenkugel account, or did you have to do other things and kind of go back and forth? Just curious what your progression
Yeah,
was.
well, I told you early on when we consolidated the sales forces, I became a chain account manager for Miller, actually working in Chicago. And that was a great job because we had access to all the resources needed to sell beer, like hockey tickets, basketball tickets, um, baseball tickets. We had the Cubs, the White Sox, the Bulls, who were beginning their first championship run, the Blackhawks. I had music venues at World Music Theater and Poplar Creek. So, I mean, you had a lot of resources that I wouldn't have had as a small family owned brewer. But we were also selling some pretty big brands: Miller Genuine Draft, Miller Lite, besides Leinenkugels. Um, but when Jake asked me to come back to Leinenkugels, I remained solely focused on Leinenkugels. I actually took over marketing as well in the late 1990s. And then we were successful. We were growing every year. We were returning a lot of money to our parent company. And importantly, we were growing our business in the upper Midwest and improving our brewery in Chippewa Falls, reinvesting back into that. In 2006, we decided to keep our then summer seasonal beer. It was Leinenkugel's Berry Weiss. We decided to keep it out as a year-round beer, so we needed a new summer seasonal brand. And I went back to our team and I said, "What did the Germans drink in the summer?" And we took a look at German market, and they drink Berliner Weiss, which is a German sour beer with a little bit of woodruff or raspberry in it. They drink a lot more of their Kolsch style beer from Cologne, a lighter style beer. They drink Hefeweizens, unfiltered wheat beers. And then we discovered this mixing of beer with either grapefruit or lemonade. They called it a Radler. And the Brits do the same thing. They mix theirs, Harp Lager, with a squirt of lemon lime soda in it. It's a half and half. They call them shandies. And I said, that's really interesting. Let's try mixing beer with different things. And we lined up I think it was our Leinenkugel's Honey Weiss beer, and started mixing it with orange juice and lemonade and ginger ale and grapefruit juice. And the one we discovered that we really liked was lemonade, but it tasted too much like soda to me. So a woman on our staff, our brewing staff, Jackie Lauman, came back with the idea of mixing it after we brewed a lighter style beer using a natural lemonade flavor at the end of the process to keep the alcohol percent at about 4.2%. Alcohol adds a lot of flavor and aroma to beer, makes it beery, not soda. And I tasted that for the first time and I went, wow, I've never tasted anything like that. We took it out to markets to sample. And back then, our sampling was, we went into bars with no shirt on or no Leinenkugel identification and said, here, drink this or drink this. And when you watch people sample and their eyes light up, you know you've got something. And they had never had a product like that, at least in the U.S., hadn't experienced that. The idea of shandies and Radlers weren't very prevalent in the U.S. at the time. So I was very lucky. A lot of things are timing, Bo. And when you're first to market and you launch and you bring that to market in a way that grows organically, where there's out of stocks because people are enjoying it so much, and all of a sudden your distributor base is excited because they want to order more, and they order 1 truckload and it's gone. Then they order 3 truckloads and it's gone, and they have retailers asking for it.
Yeah.
That's what creates the excitement. And, in a beer career, to have one of those products like Leinenkugel Summer Shandy is absolutely amazing. And I was blessed.
That's fantastic. That's a great story too. I mean, it's truly trial and error. And it's funny you mentioned that. I actually did in my MBA program, and this is in, around 2000. I remember doing a marketing project on Shandy and thinking, oh, this is this thing. And I mean, it's just very funny that it's just, I never will forget that. Then it came out soon after, like, hey, I did a project on this. It was just funny how that all worked out. So, love that. I love and being first to market, certainly awesome. But it also takes a little bit of I mean, you feel like you have a hit. I think it's something you like, maybe like as a musician, you feel like the song is pretty good, but you never know till you get it out there. And to see it take off had to be a proud moment as a kind of just the guy that's behind it all, and thinking, man, I think we got something here. That had to be pretty fun to see, to watch that just rocket ship take off and still be so popular today. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's the one beer in the Leinenkugel portfolio that still has national distribution, all 50 states.
That's amazing. That's great stuff. Well, great stuff. Well, I mean, I guess, I mean, as we, I mean, we've talked a lot through your career, but any more highlights? I mean, things change, continue to change, obviously, within the industry and acquisitions. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, but I'd love to hear more too about, when we first met, you were obviously involved in the veteran support network as well, and kind of maybe just any thoughts on, how as your career grew and maybe changed as roles got bigger and better, what you continued to do to give back to those veterans that wanted to get into the space as well. Because I know you've been very active in that your whole career.
Yeah, I was when I was in Milwaukee. I headquartered in Milwaukee at the Miller Brewing Company headquarters. I had joined when I Bo, let me take a step back because I actually left our family business in 2008, Leinenkugels, and went to work for the state of Wisconsin. I had said, I thought I had done all I could in beer. I had come out with Summer Shandy. I had hired the right person to head up marketing. And I said, this would be a good time for me to take a step back. Wisconsin's Commerce Secretary had resigned. And I said, I'd like to give back to, our state, and this might be a cool role. I was always interested in politics. And I applied to the governor's team to become its Commerce Secretary, Wisconsin's Commerce Secretary. And lo and behold, 2008, I was selected by then Governor Jim Doyle, the state of Wisconsin, to become Commerce Secretary of the state of Wisconsin. So this was early in September of 2008. By the time I took the role in the end of September in 2008, if you recall, our great national recession was beginning. Lehman Brothers had gone belly up. Unemployment went from 3-4% to 8-10% in many of the states. So I take the role at Commerce, where I'm in charge of business in the state of Wisconsin. And boy, that was an unbelievable experience, like drinking from a fire hose. But, that Marine Corps experience and Marine Corps leadership really served me well. I remember doing a walking around, we called it leadership by walking around, Bo.
Yeah.
And I walked the halls of Commerce, and honest to God, people had never seen the Commerce Secretary on their floors, the previous Commerce Secretary.
Yeah.
I would hold town halls. I would take questions. I would, all of those things that we learned to do as platoon commanders, I did. And it was eye-opening to me, or eye-opening to them, our employees at Commerce, that somebody would actually lead or be visible in this way. I left the role in 2010 and actually had a brief run for U.S. Senate here in the state of Wisconsin. At that time, Russ Feingold, our senator, was a three-term senator, and the whole thing with the Tea Party was coming online. And I said, the two guys that are running against Feingold aren't going to beat him. And I thought I had a chance. Well, I came to my senses after a brief 45-day period, and I had met with then Ron Johnson, who was a businessman here in Wisconsin, who is now Senator Ron Johnson. Yeah. And Ron Johnson said, Dick, I'm going to spend $8 million of my own money to win this race. And I said, I need to look for a way to get out of this race. So I actually endorsed Ron during my speech at the convention in May. And it was interesting. That, in a way, propelled him to the Republican Party endorsement, which wasn't going to have an endorsement at that convention. And Ron was off to the races and was elected our senator in 2010. But I went back to beer, and Jake said, my brother Jake said, "Well, Dick, you can start on the bottling line." But I had a friend, Tom Cardella, who said, "Dick, we're going to put you into this M&A role with 10th and Blake." This was the Miller craft arm called 10th and Blake, and the strategy was we were going to roll up 3 or 4 partners in the craft beer space, and we took it as a geography view. So I had a great job. I went out and met with dozens of craft brewers throughout the United States. One of my favorites was meeting Adam Firestone Walker out in Paso Robles, California. Adam was a Marine Corps infantry officer. His son, who's now running the business for Duval Morgart, was a Marine officer as well. But, it was so cool being able to talk to these young craft brewers that were thinking about their business and, do we need more resources? Do we need to form a partnership? Do we need to sell? Is this a good time to cash out or get out of the business? And that was the height of craft brewing in the early 2010s. It's come around now where many of them are looking for those strategic partners or looking to sell. But it was an interesting time for me to be in the business. The one question I would always ask these young companies is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
What do you want to be famous for? And that's, if they had thought about that, and if they knew and they could clearly articulate that, their mission and or their strategies to get there, then you knew that they were business people. But if they couldn't answer that, then you knew that they were just hobbyists.
Mm-hmm. They're beer people, not actually really people that knew the business. And that's a great way to be able to kind of separate that out and figure out who you want to move forward with. We talk to a lot of folks on the show that are in the private equity venture capital world, and they are always looking to invest. They will talk to 100 companies before they invest in one. I mean, how many companies did you talk to, and how many did you acquire? Or in general, what was kind of was there a ratio of talk to 30, maybe bring one on board, or kind of what was that process like? It's always a lot to a few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Bo, the way you ask that question, because again, it's very much about timing.
Yeah.
And we were strategic. We weren't just, casting a wide net and see who would come in. We were strategic in terms of the ones that we wanted to talk to, and kind of had our rules of engagement, if you will. But we got far down the line with several great companies. The one thing that held us back was we weren't the devil. Anheuser-Busch was the devil. They couldn't, if they were craft brewers, they couldn't do a deal with Anheuser-Busch, although that changed.
Yeah.
We were not the devil, but we were next to the devil.
Pretty close.
Being this large company. So it held back a lot of those companies. And I remember one of them was Ballast Point. And Jack White out there, we valued the business. We were far down the line with Jack in terms of valuing the business, and another company, Constellation Brands, the importers of Modelo and Pacifico and Corona, came in and offered him $1 billion for his business, $1 billion. That they later wrote that way down and ended up selling Ballast Point for less than $30 million, I think, later on. But it was really interesting time in the craft beer business, and we were really strategic with the ones. We ended up bringing in Athens, Georgia, Terrapin under. We did that deal, and we also did a deal in the cider business, Crispin Cider, when I was there. But it wasn't until Miller Coors, which was the joint venture between Coors and SAB Miller, was splitting off in 2014, with SAB Miller being bought out internationally by Anheuser-Busch InBev, that it freed up the resources for then the company to invest in a few others and to get these deals done before that transaction took place. So it was a complicated financial formula. We don't have enough time to talk about that now, but
It hurt my head anyway. That's okay.
yeah, to answer your question, Bo, we did some deals. There really wasn't a formula of how many you talk to, how
Yeah.
many you're gonna
Yeah.
land. It was more strategic than that.
Got it. Got it. Well, I see. I mean, obviously, we're kind of getting toward the end of, I mean, of the your professional career time. But I mean, as you move toward the end um, of your time in the beer industry, I mean, what other things would you highlight, or any changes you saw? And again, I would love to kind of, as we do get close to kind of wrapping up a little bit, get your take too on just the support you gave to veterans over the years.
Yeah,
'Cause you were a great champion, obviously,
yeah. So
supporting veterans
Bo,
programs. Yeah, yeah.
they asked me, a guy by the name of Dan Buttry, who's a infantry, was he a was he an engineer with the Army? Anyway, Dan served in Iraq. He asked me to get involved in the Fisher House, and we stood up the Fisher House board in Milwaukee, which 3 years later we raised over $3 million and built a Fisher House in Wisconsin at the VA. So this is a home away from home for veterans and their
Yeah.
families while they're receiving treatment at the VA. That later led me to get more involved in then the Miller Coors Veterans Resource Group. And I actually was asked to head up as their national executive sponsor the Veterans Resource Groups across all of our breweries and offices. And that led me to looking at the Veteran Jobs Mission. And that's where you and I, well, it wasn't where we first met, if you recall. We did a beer dinner together at Camp Lejeune. I
Yes,
think you
we
were
did with General
working with
Lukeman.
Jim
Yep,
Lukeman at
yes,
that
that's
time,
right.
right? But we reconnected. Of course, you were with Amazon, and we reconnected through Veteran Jobs Mission. And that was a way for me to see if we could hire more veterans and raise the awareness of veterans at Molson Coors. So that was a great way for me to do it. Today, I stay connected with the Marine Corps League here in northern Wisconsin.
Love it.
Mostly enlisted Marines from past services, a lot from my era, some from Vietnam. But it's a great way to stay connected with Marines. We meet once a month, do some great work in terms of raising money for organizations and scholarships up here. And this past out of the blue, kind of through the Marine Corps League, they were looking for a Marine officer to do a promotion ceremony. So this Monday, I am going to promote Captain Tyler Thorson to Major. Tyler is a Marquette Marine. He's stationed in Yuma currently. He's going to be up here, I think, visiting friends or being with family. And he wanted to do his promotion ceremony in northern Wisconsin. So this Monday at Labor Day at the stage at Andy's Pontoon Saloon in Eagle River, I am going to, at 1 o'clock, promote Captain Thorson to Major, and we're going to do his wedding down ceremony immediately following over Leinenkugel's at Andy's Pontoon Saloon. So, I
I
mean,
love
it's a
it.
great way to stay connected, and I was honored to be asked by Captain Thorson to do that.
I love it. I love that his wedding down money is being put on the bar for Leinenkugel's beer to be consumed, which is great. I'm just sad I'm not going to be there to partake in it, as I am an excellent drinker of Leinenkugel's beer. But good stuff. Good stuff. Well, it truly been a pleasure, Dave, to talk to you, and I really appreciate your continued support, for the Marine Corps and for veterans. I know you're super engaged up in the, as my friend Steve Yonke says, the GSW, the great state of Wisconsin, and supporting so many efforts for our veterans up that way. And again, your career it's super cool just to hear. Again, every story is different, and every path to get to where you go, even though you came from a family business. I mean, that obviously changed dramatically over time. And because of the experience you had for doing the sales and being in big corporate and going back and forth and into the actual, state politics and potentially national politics, I love that journey because every journey is truly different. And again, yours is unique and special. And I am sure will be of value to some of our transitioning folks out there that are, getting ready to make their own journey. And before we wrap up, I'll let you kind of just close with any final last words to get ready to wrap up today on your time in the Corps, your veterans advice, anything you got.
Yeah, Bo, you touched on it, and that was about kind of building your Rolodex, meeting people. My dad had a saying. He said, he told this to Jake and I. He said, the more people you meet, the more beer you'll sell. So it's kind of about building your Rolodex, and you don't talk about Rolodexes anymore. Nobody has those, but you have this great tool out there now called LinkedIn, and I'm sure you do some counseling with that at MilVet, but build your LinkedIn portfolio and be active in it, be engaged, comment on others, but also build your own content. And don't just put a LinkedIn profile out there thinking that people are going to look at it. You've got to build that. And your experience in the military is part of that. And you can build upon that with other military veterans. And I think you have a tool now that we didn't have when we were getting out of the Marines, when I was getting out of the Marines, to build that Rolodex. And I would just say that, be active, be engaged, write articles, do like you're doing, do a podcast, whatever it is. But you're gonna meet people, and the more people you meet, the more opportunities are going to come your way.
No doubt. Wear a jacket. I'm a jacket guy, as you know. I have my kind of claim to fame is the comedy jackets. But it's two things on that. Your network is your net worth. Your network is your net worth, and your network is huge. And LinkedIn is the way to build that network. And I always say too, if you're not networking, you're probably not working. So one letter difference between networking and not working. So get out there and network, and LinkedIn is a great way to do it. Well, awesome. Well, hey, thank you again. I really appreciate it, Dick. Please tell Gene we said hello, and look forward to seeing you up in the great state of Wisconsin sometime soon. Enjoy the promotion ceremony, and have a few for me. We'll talk to you soon. Out here.
All right, Bo. Thank you much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram @TheMilitaryVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, themilvet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@themilvet.org. Thank you so much and take care.